Hi, Rhea. Hey, everybody. We're going to get started relatively soon. I just wanted to go ahead and give you a moment to get in and get settled. I'm going to pin you, Rhea, just to make sure that folks can see. And then once we get started, it should be all good to go.
Okay, I can be here until 10:30. And do my this is for the web monitor, and you can see the chat. I think they'll be putting questions in the Q&A. This their questions. Do I just read them off? So then it's time for questions. Person will have some other questions. Okay, great. Yeah. Anything else? I didn't even ask you what I'm doing. No, and then I have.
Quick question.
Yes.
Are we advancing our own slides or are you advancing our slides?
Someone is gonna have to advance them, so just let them know when you
Okay.
to say like next slide and
Gotcha.
stuff.
Okay.
This is like
Thank you.
and then this mic has to stay on so that the online people can hear us, and this needs to be unmuted. So I'm about to go test.
Okay, let me know if you can go.
I think you see that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I think she's still over in the other room. Give me
Can you go grab Matt? I'll get started. And
yeah, I'll go grab. Oh, I gotta turn my phone down.
hello, everyone. We're about to get started, so if you could please get to your seats, we'll be starting momentarily. Okay, well, would like to welcome all of you to the first hybrid Sea Grant Marine Debris Symposium. We're so excited that you're able to join us today. My name is Lauren. I'm one of the organizers for the event today. And then Patricia, if you go to the next slide. These are some of our other team members at Sea Grant that you'll be seeing around the symposium. So if you see them, say hi and say thank you for helping organize the event. So today, the symposium is to introduce our Sea Grant Marine Debris awardees to NOAA, Sea Grant, and the Marine Debris Program, and the other existing support and programs that are available through NOAA. We are here to build a sense of community, really, and foster future partnerships and collaborations. And to start us off with our opening remarks, I'd like to introduce to you Janie Vivici, the Deputy Administrator of NOAA.
Good morning. I like the energy in the room. Well, thank you all for being here. And thank you, I should say, to the National Sea Grant Office for hosting this event. Thank you to National Sea Grant and the Marine Debris Program for your leadership of this program. This event was virtual last year, and I had the pleasure to participate virtually, but I'm just curious, who's here at their first Marine Debris Symposium this year? Welcome. This is great. Great to see the community growing. So as you all know, BIL and IRA, and sorry, I'm speaking in acronyms, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act have provided incredible opportunities for us to invest in coastal resilience. NOAA has had more than $6 billion to invest in issues like building resilience to extreme weather and other climate impacts, restoring habitat, improving our climate data and services, investing in job creation, and of course, preventing and removing marine debris. And these are all important community priorities that we have been trying to be responsive to. As of September 2024, NOAA has awarded more than $2.6 billion in Inflation Reduction Act funding and $1.7 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding to support more than 920 grants across the country. So we've been busy, and we know you have been too, or we're about to be very busy executing your projects. And the Marine Debris Challenge and Community Action Coalition competitions are a big part of this. And they're really near and dear to my heart. I actually had a chance to visit Lewis, Delaware over the summer and take part in a crab pot jamboree where the community identified crab pot removal, these derelict crab pots removal as a community priority in order to ensure that the fishing community could have better access to fish, that we were restoring these natural habitats. So it meant it was better for the environment, but it was also better for the economy. And the other reason these programs are so, I think, stand out in my mind is just because they, again, are responsive to community priorities. The focus on community action coalitions means that partners are coming together to identify challenges that the communities are facing and being responsive to those challenges. And equity is really at the cornerstone of these programs across the board. This one in particular is a Justice for You program, and so far NOAA has awarded more than $4 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act funding to underserved communities and tribes across the country. So we're really proud of this work. We're really excited that you're here. And I'm particularly excited that you have the chance to meet each other, share strategies, lessons, exchange contact information, to be in touch later, because I think a big part of this is learning from each other's work, forming a community around this work, and getting ready to share the impact, because we know that the problems aren't all going to be solved after this funding has been extended. We know there's going to be more work to do, and so we're already also thinking about the case making. You know, how do we share the stories of impact so we can continue to make the case for more funding like this? So again, I just want to extend my heartfelt thanks for you all, for your leadership in your communities, for the work that you all are doing, and for being here today. And with that, I think I'm passing it back to Lauren to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Janie. Next, we have Dr. Jonathan Pennock, Director of the National Sea Grant College Program.
All right, well, good morning again. All right, good, make it a little interactive. So I said, I'm John Pennock. I am Director of the National Sea Grant College Program in the National Sea Grant Office here at NOAA. I've been here 8.5 years. I spent most of my career as an estrogen biogeochemist and doing work in academia. I represent NOAA now, but I'm here because science is cool. We are a science agency at heart. We have a lot of outreach and other other things that we need to do, as Janie said, to connect the communities to the science and whatnot. And that's what Sea Grant does. I will have a few minutes here, sort of try to, for those of you who may not know, you've seen the name Sea Grant, but you haven't worked with our Sea Grant programs over the years. I'm going to give just a really quick 6 or 7 slide introduction to that. And then Scott Lundgren, who is representing the Marine Debris Program. It's in the National Ocean Service. I'm in the research office within NOAA, and Scott will bring the other side of that. We have many other partners in NOAA and many partners around the country who are working on the issues of the coast, the issues such as marine debris. It's one of those things. So I will move forward and go to the next slide, please. All right, so Sea Grant was formed now 58 years ago. It predated NOAA, or predates NOAA. It was brought into NOAA fairly early on, and its mission has always been to enhance the practical use and conservation of coastal marine and Great Lakes resources to create a sustainable economy and environment. And you all know the complexity of those. And the marine debris issues we are facing actually touch all parts of that Sea Grant mission. Next slide, please. A Sea Grant is, through the legislation and through the way we work, there we go, is a federal-state partnership. So we have 34 programs now around the country. Most of them are university-based and host universities that represent the states. All of the coastal and Great Lakes states and Puerto Rico and Guam currently make up those 34 programs. The work gets done at the states, in the states, and it is fed by strategic priorities that the states define. Part of our responsibility in the national office is to bring that together into a sort of an overriding series of focus areas that I'll talk about in just a minute. But we're a federal-state partnership, and most of our people, we have 25 people or so in the national office, and we've got well over 1,000, 1,200 Sea Grant employees out around the country working in the communities that you are now working in, whether you've been doing that or not. And that's what we do. Next slide, please. This is so Sea Grant, the way it's set up, if you look at the 3 boxes that are sort of close to each other on the upper right, it's the National Sea Grant Office, that's the 25 of us, the 34 programs I just talked about. And in our legislation, we have a National Sea Grant Advisory Board. They are responsible for informing and answering questions for the Secretary of Commerce and for me as Director of the National Sea Grant College Program. We also have, and you may know folks in the Sea Grant Association, it is not part of our legislation, but it's a 501c3 that supports some of what Sea Grant does. They can advocate on the Hill, but also they are really that engine from the university community that makes that partnership between NOAA and our universities critical. Next slide, please. So Sea Grant works, and part of what you responded to in the RFPs, it works because we are designed, and the way in which we work is to connect research, what we call extension or engagement, and education, and to do that in all the projects that we do. So some of you are here because you're being funded on some of the community level grants that we had. That is a lot of the local engagement and other things, and trying to bring what we know and find out what priorities there are in in marine debris needs. How do we address these problems? And that's a critical part of it, but it's really that connectivity, and it's what we call our Sea Grant extension folks, or the Sea Grant extension educators. That's the 1,200 or so that are out doing the work in the field, and they're the ones who have fishermen coming in and saying, I'm struggling now because I'm coming up with debris in nets. The nets are clogging because of debris. I'm using that just as one example. We do a lot of other things. And the extension folks take that and they say, well, okay, how might we design our nets differently? How might we do something differently that allows you to work and continue to earn a living as a fisherman, as usually generation after generation in your family has, and do that in a way that helps the environment, that helps the economy. Just one very small example. So we connect the research, extension, and education, listening, taking it out, having experts work on it. You're the experts in the room right now. You're the experts in this area, and then extending that backwards, educating our students at the youngest levels to try to understand what the problems are and how we as a society can make a difference. Next slide, please. Sea Grant has 4 focus areas: healthy coastal ecosystems, resilient communities and economies, sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, and environmental literacy and workforce development. And all of those 4 focus areas are being impacted by the work that you're doing and getting ready to do across those different elements. I know we can drive sort of big white trucks through a lot of those focus areas, but marine debris really is something that moves beyond that. I think it's my last slide. The next slide, please. So we're here to advance marine debris prevention and removal through the research, education, extension, and education that we do. That was in the RFPs that you responded to, and hopefully this just provides a little bit more glue to some of that as to how we work as a program. We focus on stakeholder needs. What you're doing is work. You may feel sometimes like it's basic research. That's critically important, but we want to get that to the people and to the folks working and living in the communities that you live in and that we serve. We're hoping that these will generate a number of lasting impacts that'll be carried forward long beyond this funding being gone, and we'll continue to focus on that. And we are looking to build a community of which you represent, and those who are online today represent as a community with topical area expertise in marine debris, so we can continue to do that into the future. So I will leave it at that. I'm very much looking forward to the meeting. And like Janie, I didn't get to go to Delaware. I went to one of our projects, one of your projects in New Jersey, looking at how to capture microplastics in effluent streams. And just the very first preliminary results, I think you'll hear about that on day 3, are really encouraging and exciting. And those are the kinds of things, that's why science is cool. How do we make that science make a difference in the lives of people who are living, playing, and earning a living in the coastal zone? So thanks very much. I look forward to hearing your talks as we go through the meeting.
Thank you, John. Next, we have Scott Lundgren, the Director of NOAA's Office of Response and Restoration.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janie. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for being here as part of this tremendous symposium and making connections on the topic of marine debris. My name is Scott Lundgren. I'm the Director of the Office of Response and Restoration in NOAA's National Ocean Service. And this office houses the NOAA Marine Debris Program, which is one of our five divisions within the office. I'm really excited to be here and discuss how the Marine Debris Program serves as a federal lead in marine debris and how our partnerships with the Sea Grant and grant opportunities and this growing community that we have and that's represented here allow for communities to combat marine debris. Thank you so much for Sea Grant for arranging this, and really look forward to the complementary impacts of the work moving forward, not only on the grants that you're working on now, but into the future. Next slide, please. So today I'm going to be doing three things. One, providing an introduction to the Marine Debris Program and highlighting our role in national and regional coordination, and finally providing an update on our work under the bipartisan infrastructure law with the Marine Debris Awards. Next slide. So starting with the program background, the NOAA Marine Debris Program was established by Congress in 2006 as the federal lead for all things marine debris. The program envisions a global ocean and coasts that are free from marine debris, and it's a component of the Office of Response and Restoration, or OR&R, as one of our divisions, and it really complements the other parts of the office's mission to protect and restore our ocean and coastal resources from the impacts of pollution, particularly marine debris, oil, and chemical, as well as disasters to benefit the environment, communities, and economy. Our acting Marine Debris Program Director is Amy Gories. She leads a team of 32 people, about half of whom are based here in Silver Spring, a number of that are here at the symposium, and the rest are spread around the country working on regional issues. You'll also hear from Marine Debris Deputy Director Mary Lee Howitt in the next presentation as part of the panel that I hope you'll join here in the room, and for all of us who are joining virtually that you'll be able to tune into as well. Next slide, please. The NOAA Marine Debris Program works around the United States to reduce the impacts of marine debris through 6 main pillars: prevention, removal, research, monitoring and detection, response, and coordination. Next slide. Focusing in on the coordination function, we're involved in marine debris coordination work at the regional, national, and with NOAA, OIA, and Department of State, several international efforts. I'm going to focus on the national aspects. One aspect of our national coordination is called for in the statute and is described on the left side of the slide, which involves leading an interagency marine debris coordinating committee that is made up of 13 federal departments and agencies, including EPA, Interior, Navy, and Coast Guard. And NOAA chairs this committee, which meets quarterly, including 2 public meetings per year. This committee, or IMDCC, allows us to share information, coordinate federal government efforts, and develop a biennial report to Congress on the progress on marine debris and federal actions. And then giving an increasing amount of activities around NOAA, we've recently rekindled an internal NOAA Marine Debris Collaboration Community, which is a quarterly forum for sharing and coordinating marine debris activities around the agency, which supports our representation of the breadth of NOAA actions within the IMDCC. And this is a real complement to the regional coordination. We'll go to the next slide. Which is a very important one, and particularly for Sea Grant, where you're so embedded within the communities and out there around the nation, the regional coordination role is an important place. The regional perspectives are critical because debris issues differ from place to place around our coast, and this is why we have our program staff located around the country as well. It helps us coordinate with local partners and on local marine debris issues and help to address them and solve them. The coordinators also lead and facilitate the generation of regional marine debris action plans. Most coastal states and territories, as shown in green, are covered by regularly maintained marine debris action plans, and Alaska and Rhode Island, as shown in orange, are currently in production. To create the plans, our regional coordinators work with local marine debris stakeholders in addressing marine debris problems and creating the actions that are needed to address them. And now the final topic that I want to speak to, and that's our BIL funding. So next slide. The Marine Debris Program received funding from FY22 to fiscal year 26 through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that appropriated $150 million to NOAA for marine debris assessment, prevention, mitigation, and removal. Next slide. From 22 to 24, we have utilized $77.7 million in the bipartisan infrastructure law funding and leveraged an additional $14.8 million in Inflation Reduction Act funds specific to 22 and 23. And those funds went toward 21 large debris removal projects and 6 interception technology projects. And we're also proud to announce 13 new projects that are awarded funding under the Marine Debris Removal and Interception Technologies grant awards for fiscal year 2024 that represent $23 million in federal funding investment for that removal and interception. The awarded projects under the 2 separate competitive funding opportunities continue the program's commitment to make tangible, beneficial impacts to coastal and marine habitats and communities around the nation. The 24 projects, the fiscal year 24 projects were announced in September for removal, and we have 9 projects and 1 sub-award project that leverage from $847,000 to $5.2 million. And for interception technology, we selected 4 projects leveraging from $505,000 to $912,000. The map on slide 9, if we go to the next one, highlights states with planned marine debris removal activities from the 27 funded projects under both priorities. I'm sorry to have used red and blue on this given recent events, but red areas represent large debris removal activities, and in blue are the locations of interception technology projects, and purple areas have received both type of awards. The stars reflect the recent funding in FY24. And while small on the image, you'll note down at the bottom, I hope you see that Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, and Palau all received removal funds. Next slide. Bipartisan infrastructure law funds from the Marine Debris Program are also supporting the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation through a non-competitive grant for a 5-year mission to remove the backlog of marine debris. And this is led by the Papahana Moakuvakea Marine Debris Project, or PMDP, within the Marine National Monument. And this project has been awarded $1 million in 22 and then $1.2 million annually planned to fully leverage the Benioff family private donor match. And so that's $5.8 million in federal funding over 5 years that will produce a total investment of $12 million. Nearly 300,000 pounds of marine debris were removed from the monument during 3 missions from April through October of 2024. And this includes derelict nets, abandoned derelict vessels, plastic and other debris, and also freed 4 Hawaiian green sea turtles that were entangled in derelict fishing nets. Next slide. Taking a closer look at 2 of the FY24 sub-awards that we have through both US and Virginia Institute of Marine Science, VIMS, both projects received BIL funds. Boat US Foundation is leading a national competitive grant program for the removal of abandoned and derelict vessels, a database development to track abandoned and derelict vessels around the country, and supporting ADV outreach and education. And VIMS is working to reduce the impacts of derelict fishing gear by removing and recycling abandoned blue crab traps from the Chesapeake Bay and leading a competitive nationwide grant program for the removal of derelict fishing traps. And all this is also supporting the coordination of tracking, monitoring, and assessment, and data collection and analysis to provide consistency and allow for comparison. Next slide. Taking a look at the upcoming funding opportunities through the BIL funds in the Marine Debris Program, our FY25 applications for projects are underway with the program currently reviewing applicants, and we're continuing with the 2 project categories. Next slide, the removal competition, which will support impactful large debris removal projects. And the typical award amounts range from $2 to $6 million here, with a combined total for projects being awarded $47 million. And this is both Janie and John talked about projects they've had the opportunity to see. I had the chance to go up to Nia Bay, where the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is working on a sub-award or sub-project with the Makah tribe or in the Makah tribe area to remove a number of derelict and sunken vessels, as well as even a derelict highway section that had been used as a breakwater and broke away. It really is going to make an important impact on that community, that underserved community that is in such a absolutely beautiful area of the country up the northwestern tip of the continental United States. And so it's great to see these items that would not otherwise be removed, the really large debris, and seeing the positive impact of having the resources to do that. Okay, so moving to interception on the next slide. This is a set of grants that will support the installation, monitoring, and maintenance of proven marine debris interception technologies, with typical award amounts from $250,000 to $750,000, with a combined total of $7 million in this award category. Next slide. So now to speak to the Marine Debris Program and the National Sea Grant Office and Sea Grant's BIL dollars. Both of us are issuing BIL funding through grants, and the funds are appropriated for different reasons, which you can see here. The $150 million that we received under BIL was for the NOAA Marine Debris Program to assess, prevent, mitigate, and remove marine debris between 22 and 26 fiscal years. And then the $50 million received by the National Sea Grant Office was to develop new technologies for the prevention and removal of marine debris and to build community coalitions around marine debris mitigation. So really complementary programs that are helping to build out this critically important marine debris community around the nation. Next slide. So we've demonstrated the success of leveraging the program as NOAA's federal lead for tackling marine debris along with Sea Grant toward these and many other projects. And we look forward to the continued collaboration here at the symposium and out and around the nation to tackle the challenge of marine debris. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And next we have Dr. Madison Willert, who will be talking about Sea Grant's investments in marine debris.
Hi, everyone. I'm wondering if we can first give a big round of applause to Lauren, who organizes the whole event. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so marine debris is something that Sea Grant has worked on for a long time, but there's been a renewal thanks to this recent legislation that has been touched on by both John, Jamie, and Scott. So in 2021, we had the bipartisan infrastructure law passed. This was to build a better America, and it gave us $50 million to address marine debris at Sea Grant. In 2022, we had the Inflation Reduction Act, building a clean energy economy, and this gave us an additional $8.5 million to address marine debris. Next slide, please. So Scott just touched on this, but as you all know, with those funds at Sea Grant, we ran 2 competitions. We ran our challenge competition to develop new technologies around the prevention and removal of marine debris, and we ran our community action coalitions competition to build community coalitions around marine debris mitigation. There's also the Marine Debris Program, which Scott talked about, and they had both their removal and their interception competitions. Removal for locally driven, community-based marine debris removal projects, and interception to raise awareness and encourage behavior changes to ensure long-term prevention of marine debris. Next slide, please. So as you all know, we ran 2 rounds of each of our 2 competitions, and we ended up awarding 50 projects, and approximately $54 million went straight into those projects. This includes 21 challenge projects and 29 community action coalitions projects, but even with all of that money, we still were not able to meet the growing demand for marine debris work. So we actually received 203 proposals requesting $145 million. Next slide, please. So here's a breakdown of our projects by theme that all of you are working on. You can see that our most numerous type of project is education or marine debris curriculum focused, and that comprises 38% of our projects, but we also have 12% of our projects focused on plastic reduction, 20% focused on microplastics, 8% focused on debris interception, 10% focused on recycling marine debris, 8% focused on smaller debris removal like community beach cleanups, and 4% focused on large debris removal. Next slide, please. And we have a really good geographic spread of our projects as well. So we have 12 projects on the West Coast and Pacific Islands, 5 projects in the Gulf, 9 in the Great Lakes region, 6 in the South Atlantic, 11 in the Mid-Atlantic, and 7 in the Northeast. Next slide, please. So that's all I have. I put this QR code up here so you can always find our marine debris summary, like all of our projects that we have on our website, in case you ever want that after talking with your wonderful co-awardees this week. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but otherwise we can launch straight into the panel discussion. And I'm just so excited you're all here. It's going to be a really great week. So, yeah. So our first panelist who's presenting is Susan Sherman. She's the Executive Director of the Marine Debris Foundation. Susan Sherman has worked in the environmental and social justice sectors for over 20 years. Her educational foundation in environmental science propelled her to work with Superfund remediation work as a US EPA contractor and later as a fundraiser for a major environmental law and policy NGO in the southeastern United States. Susan went on to serve as executive director of the Shenandoah National Park Trust, which she helped build into a significant philanthropic partner to the National Park Service. She has helped launch numerous nonprofits, including the Blue Ridge Prism, a cooperative invasive species management organization, and Well Aware, a community-based initiative that breaks down barriers to healthcare in historically underserved communities. She earned her BS in environmental biology from the University of Michigan and her MA in environmental education from Northeastern Illinois University. Let's give it up for Susan.
Can you come give her a presentation?
Yes, Susan, come over here. You're going to present, and then we're doing the panel. Yes. Perfect.
No rest. Hi, it's nice to meet you all, and thanks for having me, Susan Sherman. I just want to start out by saying I do not have a staff like the predecessors that you just heard from have. So you will also notice that I was not hired for my presentation, my PowerPoint skills. So I'm just going to say forgive me, but hopefully the information that I'm sharing will be useful. The next slide, please. So you all very well know that the Marine Debris Program serves a wide array of programs and goals. And the organization that I am a part of, the Marine Debris Foundation, was born through the Marine Debris Program. And in fact, Nancy Wallace is here today, who is the director of Marine Debris Program, and realized that government agencies have significant role to play in the work that all of you are doing across the country, but there are limitations to what government agencies and programs can do. Next slide, please. So some of the limitations, and I can't see the slide, so pardon me if I keep referring back. So some of the limitations of government agencies and programs are they are risk averse by definition. So public-private partnerships, one of the beauties of those types of relationships is that the private sector, otherwise known as Marine Debris Foundation in this case, can bring innovation, ingenuity, and private sector resources to commingle with public dollars. And in so doing, we can take some more risks in research and development. We can really tap into the innovation of the private sector. Also, government agencies really don't want to hang out in the policy arena. And any of the work that we are doing, although we are apolitical, all of this work, of course, has roles to play in a policy landscape. And so as the private sector partner to a federal program, we can really push the envelope. We can educate policymakers, legislators on the ways that we feel like marine debris work could and should be moving to really move the needle on this work in a significant way. We can also break down larger federal grants. So you saw the really large numbers on the screens previously. So federal grants are large, they can make great impacts, but they are onerous. Any of you who have ever filled out a federal grant application, it is a heavy lift. The application process is difficult, the reporting process is difficult. And for lots and lots of nonprofits and other entities across the country, that ROI, that return on investment is not worth it, or they just don't have the capacity. They don't have a grant writer on staff, or they're all volunteer driven. And so one of the things that an organization like ours can do is we can pull down federal dollars and then break those up into smaller grants and also have very low barriers to access in comparison to a federal grant. So our grant applications are much less onerous than a federal application. And so we can really, as we say, spread the love to many more organizations that collectively are doing really impactful work. Next slide, please. So I think this is just a repetition of what I just said. We can go on to the next. So public-private partnerships, I'm sure you're familiar with others across the federal landscape. The one that I came from most recently was within the National Park Service, Department of Interior. So most of my background is public lands. But National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is also a public-private partnership with NOAA, and some of you are here today. NIFWIF with Fish and Wildlife Service, et cetera. So we were born of the same mold and really modeled on some of these other public-private partnerships. Next, please. So the origin story, as I had mentioned earlier, was that the Marine Debris Program leadership really took a look around and said, what could really help is if we had the private sector working with us in collaboration with us. There are lots of disparate groups, organizations working on marine debris at the federal level. A public-private partnership could really help us drive this work forward. And so, excuse me, the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act, which was enacted in 2020, was hugely supported by bipartisan support. The two major co-sponsors on that were Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska, Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island. The two of them continue to collaborate and work together on ocean issues. And we don't serve any political offices. We don't serve any particular senators or representatives' offices, but we do keep everyone close and moving forward together, we hope. So the board was appointed, so Dr. Spinrad, NOAA administrator, serves on our board ex officio. It's an appointed board, so the board was stood up in 2022. I was hired in 2023, so I'm just about a year in to my position. I work remotely. I work from a home office in Central Virginia. I've got a couple of contract employees. One's in Alaska, one's in Colorado. Next, please. So the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act really prescribed how the Marine Debris Foundation is to operate. And we have two primary mandates per the legislation. One is to, quote, augment the work of NOAA's Marine Debris Program, and the other is to issue a Genius Prize for Innovation. And then connected to those is develop partnerships that together can move the work forward. And so partnerships with groups that are represented in this room and beyond. Next, please. So how do we interpret augmenting the work of NOAA's Marine Debris Program? So as you've just heard, and you know, that NOAA has regional action plans, and these are actively evolving. They're developed every 5 to 10 years, and they're community driven, and that to us is really important. This is not NOAA or Marine Debris Program dictating what regions or communities need to do to address their marine debris. These are diverse stakeholders from industry and government and the NGO community that are coming together to decide collectively, what do we want to do over the next 5 to 10 years to address marine debris. And so the Marine Debris Foundation, in its first few rounds of grant making that were provided by federal funding, looked across at the marine debris action plans, got feedback from NOAA and the communities on how we can help move those goals forward that are addressed in the Marine Debris Action Plan. The roadmap's already there for us. We didn't want to recreate the wheel. Next, please. So the first, I will go through these pretty quickly. The first round of grant making happened actually before I was hired. Thank you. 2 minutes. Okay. I am going to just fly through these. We were bombarded. An all-volunteer board got 550 applications from 85 countries and without staff to help vet this. Anyway, made a first round, really great, impactful first round grants. What they did was they had no parameters on, they said, if you're working on marine debris, send us your application. Round two, next please. Round two, we put up some guardrails and said you have to be US based and you have to be working on prevention. And we got a significantly lower number of applications to be able to consider. Next, please. And then round three was really rapid fire. We only had a very short amount of time to distribute grants because this was residual funding that we didn't spend out in the first two grant cycles. So, excuse me, these are the round three grants, and we're actually working with Rhode Island Sea Grant. Next, please. So moving forward, we are working on our federal grant application, which I can tell you is keeping me up at nights. And we will be hopefully pulling down a significant amount of federal funding for fiscal 25 and 4 years after that, that we then must match. Part of that requirement is a match with private sector funding. So once we are able to secure the federal funding and the federal match, then we will have another full round of grant making. So those of you in the room, working with Sea Grant and Marine Debris Program, it's a dynamic relationship. We are a funder, we are also a partner. We may be asking you for funding at some point to help us match. And so it's a really dynamic landscape. We're very excited and proud to be in this position. We want to learn from you. And so I will be here all week and look forward to meeting you. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. That was great. Our next speaker is Ramel Nandi, the National Program Lead for EPA Trash-Free Waters. Ramel has been the U.S. EPA Trash-Free Waters National Program Lead located within the Office of Wetlands, Oceans, and Watersheds since 2018. In that role, he has been a key leader in the agency's efforts to address the problem of trash loadings into our waterways and the ocean. Among other roles, he is the EPA co-lead on the National Strategy to Prevent Plastic Pollution, a requirement of the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act of 2020. He is also EPA's official representative on the Interagency Marine Debris Coordinating Committee and represents the Office of Water on the U.S. Government Nanoplastics Interest Group. He also leads EPA's Marine Litter and Plastics Work Group. He received his BA from Bowdoin College, a Master of Science degree in Political Science from the University of Oregon, and a Master in Public Policy with a focus on environmental and natural resources from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Please help me welcome Ramel.
Thanks, Maddie, and thank you, Lauren, for the invite. I really appreciate it. I feel like I need a better headshot than that. I gotta do better. And Susan, you're great without written talking points. I can't do these sort of things without something to refer to, so I'm impressed by that. So, Trash-Free Waters. Trash-Free Waters is a voluntary, non-statutory program that was created in 2013, so a very recent program. When EPA's Office of Water decided that the issue of trash getting into waterways and the ocean could really benefit from more concerted attention from the agency, and from a program that could help track and aid coordination on what was happening agency-wide related to this issue. Next slide, please. So here you can see our program's stated goals. Trash-Free Waters is, of course, an issue-based program, but we accomplish these goals largely via active partnerships in locations around the country. Our work directly addresses trash loadings to inland waterways, not just marine systems, and we primarily address land-based sources of trash. I should point out, we do not have a dedicated grant program for trash-free waters. There was one authorized by the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act that was just mentioned. However, we never got an appropriation for that authorized grant program, and it runs out in FY25. So unfortunately, That never came through. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about just some of the resources that we are either currently working on or have completed in the last few years. Links for all the resources I mentioned are on the Trash Free Waters website, of course, except for the ones which are not yet complete. This is our program logo. This was very difficult to get through the EPA hierarchy, but we got one. This is for use on our publications and other materials, and with our approval, our program partners can also use our logo on their materials, project signage, etc. Next slide, please. So the National Strategy to Prevent Plastic Pollution. The Trash Free Waters program has been co-leading with our Office of Land and Emergency Management, that's our Solid Waste Management Office, the development of a domestic stakeholder strategy that the agency dubbed the National Strategy to Prevent Plastic Pollution. This is pursuant to Section 301 of the Save Our Seas 2.0 Act of 2020. The strategy is about keeping primarily plastic waste, but also other solid waste materials out of the environment, including our domestic waterways and ocean, or removing it once it is there. So this is great news. The strategy has actually just made it past OMB and should actually be out next week, knock on wood. But this has been a long time coming. It's been part of my life for a long time, so I'm glad to see it get out in the world. Next slide, please. So for the escape trash risk map, I had wanted a way to measure progress against the plastic strategy that I just mentioned, as well as to develop a resource that would help local stakeholders know where their litter densities were likely to be highest. So we started a project working with the University of Georgia. This is Jenna Jambek's group. I know many of you must know Jenna. To develop a model for estimating counts, item types, and material types of trash alongside roadways and at risk for getting into domestic waterways. We also have some data on the map on microplastics presence for specific domestic water bodies, where we found studies that show this information as well. We intend to run the model iteratively over time to see what is happening trend-wise over time. So we are trying to stand up a monitoring network where we can gather this empirical litter data and then rerun the model based on that data. This information is on the map, and that is available on our website right now. We actually only launched that in early October. Next slide, please. So our reusable foodware project. So I've been interested in looking for circular economy initiatives for some time, and we have supported local projects on things like encouraging the use of reusables. So we're now partnering with an NGO called Perpetual, who are an expert in the reuse space, on a project that will offer select municipalities the resources and expertise required to effectively design, contract, and oversee the implementation of reusable foodware systems at city scale. So we're not talking 1 or 2 restaurants, we're talking city scale reusable foodware systems. A key goal of this initiative is to show proof of concept that reuse can be economically viable, reduce negative environmental impacts, be healthy and safe, aligned with city planning, and be equitable and accessible to users. After we have stood up reusable foodware systems in our partner cities, we're hoping to share best practices on how to do this effectively so that other cities can potentially launch reusable foodware programs of their own. Next slide, please. So Save Our Seas 2.0 Section 132 calls for the Interagency Marine Debris Coordinating Committee to develop a report on microfiber pollution. So because I'm a glutton for punishment, I raised my hand and I spoke to then Marine Debris Program Chief Nancy Wallace and said, hey, Trash Free Waters can do this. So we agreed to lead the development of the report. In the end, we did get a lot of help from the Marine Debris Program. We're really co-leads on the report, and we were doing this on behalf of the IMDCC. So the report was released in July of this year. An important part of that report is a 5-year federal plan in collaboration with stakeholders to reduce microfiber pollution. So that was in the statute, that requirement for the federal plan. We have a dozen federal agencies with firm or contingent commitments in that federal plan, and implementation has just started. Next slide, please. So back in 2017, this is actually predating my time with the Trash Free Waters program, we got a lot of internationally recognized researchers together to discuss the state of the science of remaining research gaps on microplastics. And the findings of that workshop were encapsulated in a report that's on our website. But after consulting with several experts, we decided that with the explosion in microplastics research we've seen since 2017, we should do a progress report that again looks at the state of the science, remaining research gaps, and emerging areas of interest. So we developed the report and released it in December 2021, and you can see on screen what the content is. We have presented this paper at a number of conferences for both researchers and potential funders. Next slide, please. Maybe I'll save a little time on this slide. I'll just say about this one that we developed a summary paper of learning on tire particles in 2023 based on 2 expert roundtables we hosted. So industry, NGOs, the research community, etc. And what the paper does, it outlines future needs for any number of stakeholders to address alone or with partners. Next slide, please. The Trash Stormwater Permit Compendium was released in April 2021 and is posted on our website. This document provides guidance on writing effective trash provisions into stormwater permits, but also into stormwater management plans and the like. I'm sure you all know stormwater is a very important nexus for how trash gets into waterways, so we thought it was critical to address that nexus. Next slide, please. The Escape Trash Assessment Protocol, or ETAP, is a trash assessment protocol we released in April 2021, which emerged out of stakeholder feedback saying that existing protocols could be more helpful in assisting users to figure out what upstream interventions would be useful based on the nature of local escape trash streams. ETAP is now part of the Marine Debris Tracker app that is widely used around the country and beyond, and that allows us to warehouse and analyze the data collected via the protocol. ETAP is useful not only for helping identify tailored management interventions, but potentially to inform impaired water body listings pursuant to Section 303D of the Clean Water Act, and also to inform trash provisions that can be incorporated into stormwater permits. We also released in September 2021 a beach microplastics assessment protocol working with the NGO 5 gyres. Next slide, please. For outreach, we write and distribute our long-standing full newsletter. It's called The Flow. That contains articles on a number of trash-related efforts and topics, both nationally and internationally. The Rapid is our monthly communication that provides timely information on upcoming events, funding opportunities, news items, and microplastics research. We also have a webinar series through which we usually try to have some degree of focus on what stakeholders themselves can do to help mitigate the problem of aquatic trash related to the specific topic of the webinar. Actually, the next one's on December 10th. We're doing something a little different. We're going to talk about that escape trash risk map, so it's going to be specifically on that project. Usually we have more of a topical webinar. We also have a topical article series, which has project highlights and more on our website. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about our place-based projects, giving you some overall numbers as well as a few examples of such projects. Information on all of these are on our website, except for, I think, one of them. Next slide, please. All right, so projects in particular locales is really the core of our program. These projects run the gamut from trash capture projects, source reduction projects, outreach and education, research projects, and more. You can see some of the project numbers here. That's through FY24. We don't have, as I mentioned earlier, a national grant program, but we have been able to support place-based work through the Trash Free Waters operational budget and through technical assistance. And we do have other EPA programs that have funded trash mitigation work around the country. Next slide, please. So now I'll go into a few specific examples of Trash Free Waters projects in particular places. The first project example is a trash capture project in the Proctor Creek watershed around Atlanta. This project serves as an example of multi-partner collaboration and private sector engagement to advance trash-free communities. Various trash capture devices, such as litter getters, which are portable in-stream trash capture devices, have been installed both in the main spine of Proctor Creek and in several tributaries. We did have a potential funder event with private sector entities, and in the end, one of them, Coca-Cola's World Without Waste campaign, invested $350,000 for trash capture in 6 locations within the Proctor Creek watershed. There was also an educational component to this project. This is also an example of an environmental justice project, given the disadvantaged communities in the watershed. And with the help of our Urban Waters program, we were also able to use it as an employment opportunity for local youth to clean out the traps. Next slide, please. The South Atlantic strategy focuses on trash mitigation in the Carolinas and the eastern regions of Georgia and Florida. The intention of the strategy is to help these 4 states and their municipalities, businesses, and NGOs work to reduce litter and mismanaged waste from entering regional waterways and eventually the Atlantic. So the Trash Free Waters program convened a series of statewide and regional workshops to come to agreement on overarching goals and to identify actions to implement each goal. You can find the strategy on our website. We also built a publicly viewable online implementation platform to track implementation and also act as a peer-to-peer learning tool. We also meet twice a year as a group and share information. In fact, the next call is on November 18th, so very close. Okay, so I'll go through the last two very quickly because I'm at time. This is another example. This is working on a reusables campaign in the Barnegat Bay watershed in New Jersey. So we're going to be having a case study up on this. We ran this campaign for 2 years with an organization called the Barnegat Bay Partnership. Next slide. And this is a pilot project we went with Washington, D.C. about essentially they were having a big problem with unintentional spillage on trash collection days. So we did a messaging campaign in some target neighborhoods, and we compared it to some similarly situated control neighborhoods, and what we found out is our messaging campaign did have a positive effect. So we have a case study on that project on our website as well. And then our final slide, and that's me. Sorry, I forgot to put I did. I remember to put the website on this time. So thank you very much, and I'll be on the panel to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Ramel. Our next speaker is Mary Lee Howard, the Deputy Director of the NOAA Marine Debris Program. Mary Lee serves as the Deputy Director of the NOAA Marine Debris Program, and she has worked on ocean and water policy related issues for more than 10 years. Before working with the Marine Debris Program, Mary Lee worked on policy and congressional affairs as a senior policy advisor at the National Ocean Service and was a Knauss Sea Grant Fellow in 2008. She received a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from Oberlin College and a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in water resource management from the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies.
All right, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. As mentioned, my name is Mary Lee Howitt, where I serve as the Deputy Division Chief for the Marine Debris Program. And I was thinking last night, actually, one of my first jobs after college was working for Maine Sea Grant on their Healthy Beaches program. And then, as Maddie mentioned, I was a Knauss Sea Grant Fellow from Wisconsin Sea Grant. So just lots of connection to the Sea Grant community, and happy to make more connections with you all today. So let's go to the next slide, please. Since you already heard from Scott about the Marine Debris Program at a high level, I thought I'd talk a little bit more about the scope of the issue and key challenges, and then get into some more depth on resources and opportunities to work together. Next slide. So first off, just a challenge is just the different types of marine debris, the different materials, the different size classes of this particular type of pollution. Plastic is the most common type of marine debris, and we talk about plastics as a heterogeneous pollutant because they can vary in size, shape, chemical composition, and additives. And plastic is a key concern, and I know many of the projects you are working on focus on plastic. And it's a concern because of its durability and persistence in the environment. Rates of plastic waste are increasing, and I do want to mention that some of the other common materials that we are addressing with our bipartisan infrastructure law funding include metal, fiberglass, and treated wood. Next slide. In terms of impacts, so marine debris could cause numerous problems in the way of impacts, and I'm sure many of these are very familiar to you in terms of entanglement, ingestion, or damage caused by large debris on sensitive habitats. Marine debris can also impact our economy and our communities. Research is also demonstrating the causal links between plastics and other major environmental problems at the global scale, exacerbating the consequences of climate change and biodiversity loss. Next slide. In terms of pathways, additional complexity are just the multiple ways that marine debris can end up in the ocean, and particularly plastic, which this figure demonstrates. And as you can see, there's just a variety of ways that land-based and sea-based sources of plastic debris end up in the ocean. And we're still trying to answer the question, where does it go? Where does it end up once in the ocean? Next slide. In terms of challenges, I think we could spend the next 3 days talking about challenges associated with this issue. And this slide is just highlighting a few. I do want to mention just the level of plastic pollution in the environment is now considered to be beyond a sustainable threshold that could significantly disrupt Earth systems and potentially cause severe environmental and health impacts. We're also unclear about the dangers that all the different chemicals that are added to plastic pose. We also have a variety of analytical methods that we use to measure and collect data, and that really poses some real challenges in terms of comparing information and data. But the bottom line, I think you all know, we have a problem, we have a big problem, and that's why we're all here to try to tackle this together. At the Marine Debris Program, we take an approach of the 6 different priorities that Scott mentioned. So prevention, removal, research, monitoring and detection, response and coordination. And this last one is why we're all here, to try to coordinate better and learn from each other. And despite all the challenges and many unknowns, we need to act, and that's what we're doing. Next slide. All right, so I want to dig into a little bit more about resources and opportunities. If we could go to the next slide. And talk a little bit more about funding. So the Marine Debris Program has been funding grants since we were established in 2006. We provide competitive funding opportunities that you've already heard about. But in the past, we've funded projects related to prevention and research as well. And right now with BIL funding, we're really focused on removal. But outside of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have an open opportunity right now in partnership with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, focused on the Ocean Odyssey competition. These awards will support initiatives that prevent the adverse impacts of marine debris in communities that are underserved, underburdened, or underrepresented or overburdened by marine debris. And we're excited to share that this opportunity is open right now through November 20th. And you can see that these are pretty small grants, but really impactful small amounts of money. Okay, next slide, please. I do want to just acknowledge the shared partners that we have with Sea Grant, many of whom I know are in the room today or will be in the room over the next few days. And the funding between our 2 programs, I believe, is really building upon one another's investments. In this slide, I'm just highlighting a few of our funded projects with partners that Sea Grant is now funding as well, whether it's the Tijuana River Near on the border of the US and Mexico, or whether it's the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Debris Project out of Hawaii, or the Ocean Conservancy work in Florida. Next slide. All right, as for opportunities, the Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project, which we call MDMAP for short, is NOAA's flagship initiative that engages partner organizations and volunteers across the nation and around the world to survey and record the amount and types of marine debris on shorelines. We have a number of resources for participants to get started, included educational tools for students, and we also have a project underway for a mobile application in partnership with the University of Georgia to make it easier for folks to engage. We are always interested and eager to invite more participants and encourage you to reach out if interested in connecting. Next slide. I'm also excited to share a new project that we announced last month, the launch of the NOAA Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project Nationwide Survey. It's a very long title, with funding provided by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This project will establish a scientifically valid assessment of marine debris found on U.S. shorelines with the vision to repeat this every 11 years to detect trends. This survey will help answer currently unaddressed questions, such as how much marine debris is on shorelines in the United States at any given time, and which regions have more or less debris. We will establish regional report cards, as well as have a comprehensive data set that will be publicly available. Next slide. Now, Scott already touched upon our state and regional marine debris action plans, but I wanted to just touch upon this in a little bit more detail. These plans really serve as a roadmap for stakeholders across a state or region to address the problem of marine debris. And I'm happy to say there's just great collaboration already across our program and the Sea Grant states. And there's always an opportunity to do more. We have a history of working with Sea Grant, whether it's the co-development of the plan for Long Island Sound, that Marine Debris Action Plan, or inviting Sea Grant to participate in our workshops. And I think one of the benefits of this collaboration is just the connection to funding opportunities as well. But this is really an area where I think thinking about the post-bipartisan infrastructure law environment, kind of this is an area where I think we can continue to work together to sustain our momentum. Next slide. And if you aren't aware of our regional coordinators, here's a map and list of where they're located. They're just a fabulous resource for making connections across projects and with partners. Next slide. All right, so the first step to solving a problem is to learn more about it. And the Marine Debris Program has a number of educational resources. For the sake of time, I'll just note our website serves as a great authoritative resource on the issue of marine debris, and we have just a variety of educational resources such as curriculum. If any of your projects include education or outreach components, I do encourage you to visit our website to see what may already exist. And one particular fun outreach activity that's going on right now is our annual art contest. Art is a great way to spread awareness about marine debris, and the art contest is open right now through December 13th. Next slide. We have a variety of different resources, and I won't go through all of these, but just want to call out a couple of reports to Congress that we've delivered recently. One of which you already heard about from Ramel, the microfiber pollution report. We also have a sources and impacts of derelict fishing gear report that we delivered to Congress and is publicly available as well. Next slide. And then I would be remiss not to mention this really important resource if you haven't come across it yet. Save Our Seas 2.0 Act required a report on the United States contribution to global ocean plastic waste. This is a project that we funded at the Marine Debris Program to the national academies, and it's just an amazing resource, comprehensive report on the state of the science with a variety of findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Next slide. And in conclusion, I just want to talk a little bit about coordination. Our efforts would not be successful without coordination across all different scales, whether regionally, nationally, or internationally. And as I mentioned before, BIL funding is time limited. I believe we need to make sure we're sustaining efforts and momentum created by this once in a lifetime opportunity. Really think working regionally with the action plans is a way to sustain connections. And I look forward to learning from you over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lee. Okay, our final speaker before we launch into the panel discussion is Kit Cunningham. She's a current CNAS Marine Policy Fellow in Lisa Murkowski's office. Kit earned her bachelor's degree in conservation biology and ecology from Montana State University in 2017. A year later, a 2-week contract disentangling northern fur seals in the Pribilof Islands, Alaska, changed her career path. This work sparked a passion for Kit, leading to fieldwork in remote circumpolar locations in Alaska and Antarctica. Her previous work with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game focused on marine debris removal from the Forester Island complex in southeast Alaska. In 2024, she earned a master's degree in wildlife biology from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Currently, Kit is a CNAS Marine Policy Fellow, like I said, in Senator Lisa Murkowski's office.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I think it's first slide when you're ready. Yeah, as I said, my name is Kit Cunningham. I am a CNAS Fellow for Senator Murkowski. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to talk about the NOAA Marine Debris Program so much, nor about microplastics. I'm pretty sure there's people in this room who know more about it than I do. So I'm just going to tell my story of how I got here. And hopefully for those of you who are part of the Marine Debris Program or Sea Grant, hopefully can share a little bit of that because you are largely why I'm here. So first slide. So this is kind of what brought me here. This is the Forester Island Complex, or Cascou. It's located in Southeast Alaska, and I'll show a map of that. But it's an amazing place. Next slide. And I was here to study these critters at the time and had no idea about the NOAA Marine Debris Removal Program or what I was doing in my life. I was just studying Steller sea lion population at the time. And this island it's amazing. It has the largest Steller sea lion recruit in North America, tons of nesting and burrowing seabirds, and is a biological hotspot for sure. It's a really important place. Next slide. As you can see, it's located in southeast Alaska. It's along the continental shelf, so there's a lot of upwelling. Next slide. And one more, next slide. And it has a lot of marine debris, as you can imagine. There's a lot of big currents that go there. And so a lot of life, but also plastic. And on that photo on the right, we'd find these like pits of styrofoam beads, which was overwhelming. So that led me to applying with Alaska Department of Fish and Game for one of the NOAA Marine Debris Removal Grants, which is something many of you are part of. And pretty amazing, we got the funding. So part of that was to do two things, was to remove as much of marine debris as we could, and then also to do microplastic research and kind of do comparison. Next slide. So I'm not going to dwell on this that much, but one thing I did want to note is, so in the end, we removed over a 4 or 5 week period, we removed 12,000 pounds of marine debris, which doesn't seem like a ton, but actually with these really remote islands, it was really challenging. But one thing I did want to note is we removed that debris and then we categorized it by type of plastic. And one thing that I found surprising is actually most of the plastic is more dense than water, but had air trapped in it. And so that just gives me an idea that for a lot of marine debris, we just have this time frame that we can collect it before it sinks. But we'll dwell on that later. Next slide, please. So another outcome of this project was we collected Steller sea lion scat and essentially Cassin's auklet vomit to do microplastics research. And at that point, or I guess not yet, Steller sea lions hadn't been documented to have microplastics, and then Cassin's auklets hadn't had documented to have microplastics in Alaska. And so thus far, we're still going through the samples, but there's microplastics in both species, and have not had any samples without it yet. And this is one of the rookery sites. So I'm still working through the samples. The next step is we're gonna take the microplastic type and fit it to the actual plastic composition, whether it's, high density polyethylene or whatever it may be. Next slide. So one of the biggest accomplishments of this project, and all those involved, is of the 12,000, only 136 pounds went to a landfill. The rest of it was recycled or in some capacity. And this is one of the landfills we brought it to. This is the Ketchikan landfill. And at this point, so we collected all this waste and had realized, as you pick things up, that most of it isn't from Alaska, and it's from all over the world, the US included, obviously. And so I had realized that this is a problem that went well beyond what I was doing at the time, and led me to applying for the CNAS fellowship, and how I got it. So next slide. So this year, during the CNAS fellowship, I went back to Alaska as part of the fellowship to do a presentation at a conference called ATCEM, which is the Alaska Tribal Conference on Environmental Management. And I was talking about marine debris and funding and all that stuff. And as I was chatting with folks, I realized that the issue was not about collection, it was about the waste once we did have it collected. So Alaska has more coastline, as many of you know, than the rest of the United States. And folks had voluntarily been collecting hundreds of thousands of pounds of debris, but would bring it to their landfill and don't have the capacity to deal with it. So they brought up these things in mind. So currently, a lot of remote areas in Alaska have little burn pits, as seen in the upper right corner, which are little burn barrels that they burn to keep up with waste. And then these other slides are, there's no landfill liners, and so a lot of that trash and marine debris just leachates, or that leachate gets into the environment. And there's no regulation on the distance between landfill and the school or community. So I came in with my marine debris perspective and then took a big step back of like this, as you all know, this goes into a much greater issue. Next slide. So while I've been in this fellowship, and I'm sure many of you could talk more about this than I could, but I've been learning how waste has been managed on a congressional level, which led me to first the Solid Waste Disposal Act, which came up when the United States was starting to go through large amounts of consumer goods, single-use items, and we needed a way to deal with it. So we came up with, the Solid Waste Disposal Act, and then later RCRA, which is currently what guides waste management, defines solid waste management, and also has, determines like landfills need to have liners, and through the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, that's how like incineration is monitored, and groundwater is monitored as well. So I realized the structure that was built around waste that is written in our statute. Next slide. And then I come across from one of the Alaska constituents the Land Disposal Program Flexibility Act of 1996, which essentially all the requirements that are based in Congress or in statute that I just mentioned, it provides a lot of flexibility in those requirements for certain communities, and specifically Alaska Native communities. And while that was a good thing at the time, it was really understandable because a lot of these requirements would cost a lot of money. Unfortunately, as you could tell from earlier, it kind of shifted it from a financial burden into a health and environmental burden, as we've seen. Next slide. Oh, and of the landfills, I didn't think that there would be that many, but 204 landfills in Alaska and 186 fall under this category of being a class 3 landfill, not needing to follow these requirements. So I reached out to folks in the community and kind of figured out what is currently going on. And right now, hazardous waste in Alaska is being funded by this really cool program, the Backhaul Alaska program, which, as you can see, shuttles waste from all around Alaska to the lower 48 to be properly dealt with. But there's not much funding. So IGAP, unfortunately, gets competed against for other sewage and water resources for a lot of these communities. And then EPA funding will be running out for this program next year. And then there's state partnerships. So they're kind of carrying this right now. So I think, as many of you in this room recognize, that this goes from a marine debris problem to a waste problem in general. And it's funny, I got into this hoping I could narrow down my approach, but instead I feel like I backed up more. Thank you. Next slide. I'm just going to end on this slide because for those of you who are part of the Sea Grant program or the NOAA Marine Debris program, you do a lot of behind the scenes work, and I guess I wanted to connect you to the actual maybe people who are involved with this. So there's me, obviously I'm here, but there's so many people that were involved with this project and me being here that you don't get to interact with, which is a shame because, for example, in this slide, there's 3 people behind me and they're volunteers and paid staff that spent 6 weeks working on this with me, like every day. It was a long period. And then the 2 boats in the back were from a local seafood tender that donated 2 100-foot tenders to remove this debris along with a seining skiff. And then like a forklift was donated, like the barge was donated, like so many people want to be part of this. And so I guess I want to end it with even though there's a lot of issues that we still have to work through, obviously, I feel really privileged to have had the opportunity to meet folks on the ground that like want to be part of these solutions. And I hope that I can convey that to you now, that there are more people who really want to see things change and are part of that. Next slide. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kit. We're launching into a 25-ish minute panel discussion now, and we want to start off with a Q&A from the audience for our 4 wonderful panelists. So who has a question for them? All right, I saw Roy and then Adam.
Can you put your hands up again?
I'm going to get you guys.
Good morning. So I want to thank the panelists for the wonderful presentations. My first question is for Susan. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Genius program that you didn't have time to elaborate? And who are the target audience for that?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that question. I'm sorry, I had to rush through the slides. I didn't get to touch on that. So again, Save Our Seas 2.0, one of the requirements for Marine Debris Foundation is to award, at least on an every other year basis, a Genius Prize for innovation. And we are right now working on the parameters of that. And so the idea would be that we would, just like there are many award organizations at this point around the world. And so we are in deep learning mode. We've been talking to a number of these other organizations to learn best practices and understand where we can add value and not replicate work that's already been done. And we will later in, I would say in the second half of 2025, we will have our parameters established, how entities, organizations, teams can apply for the award. It will be a 6-figure award, and the idea, as the name implies, is to really bring innovative technology or concepts to market that are just about ready for market, ready to launch, and to, as if you're familiar with prizes, often it's the purse is almost secondary to what the prize can really make available to the winning teams. Is its exposure in the marketplace, its attraction of additional funding, and really to scale a concept that's ready to move forward. So that's our goal with the Genius Prize.
All right, is that Adam in the back? Oh my God.
With regard to the EPA's trash-free waters, I come from the Cape and Islands region. Wastewater restrictions are a major barrier to reusable programs. Have you experienced that in any of your work? And have you identified any ways to mitigate those barriers regarding wastewater?
Yeah, so we do have an Office of Wastewater Management that has looked into the issue of wastewater effluent and, microplastics getting in through that pathway. And there are technologies that are actually pretty effective that way. Trash-free waters itself has not addressed wastewater as much as a program. Remember how our program works, right? So a lot of times what happens is stakeholders are coming to us and saying, here are our goals, here's what we want to achieve, how can you help us? And we don't actually have an example of someone who's come in specifically to deal with the issue of wastewater. I know our Office of Research and Development has addressed that in looking at technologies that are good for, specifically for microplastics mitigation. So it's clearly an issue. We all know about it. I can't say my program specifically has addressed that issue.
Thank
you. Question over here.
Hello. Thank you for a really great visual online.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for an awesome round of initial presentations. So something that I've been kind of grappling with the project that we're rolling out as part of this funding opportunity is how to engage industry, particularly oil, gas, and plastics. We all know it can be controversial. They can, there can be concerns about them trying to undermine your project, but obviously having them involved, if you can get them aligned and in support of your work, can be huge. So I was just curious in your policies and programs and funding opportunities, how you've engaged industry and if it's been successful. And yeah, that can go to anyone. I know, Ramel, you talked about Coca-Cola coming in and funding a really exciting project after your work. So yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to start. Yeah, thanks. That is a challenge, honestly, for us. So we have had industry do some funding work. So there's a plastics lobby, but there's not necessarily a plastics in waterways lobby, right? So we have had some, as I said, with the Proctor Creek watershed, that's one example for funding of projects, usually more end of pipe stuff. You know, people aren't necessarily interested in things like production when they're come from the private sector, at least in our experience. We have had a little bit of success working with, not necessarily with major corporations, but with smaller private sectors, you know, restaurant associations and the like, looking at single-use plastics. We have had some success with that. Obviously, you heard about a reusable foodware project. So there's been some engagement there. Now, before I came onto Trash-Free Waters, we actually did have a corporate roundtable that then Administrator Gina McCarthy was sort of facilitating for us. So I wasn't there because it was before my time in the program, but my understanding from what happened is it was very challenging to get these it wasn't like CEOs, it was sustainability officers for these corporations. It was very difficult to get them to commit to things that they weren't already doing. It was, you know, they would basically talking about the things they were doing, which in some cases was, you know, significant. But we did have some challenges with saying, okay, what's the next thing? What are you going to commit to next? And what can we do to help you do that? A lot of times I think our role is, you know, helping set the goal and then letting the private sector speak to the most efficient way to get to that goal. And we do that in the plastic strategy, for example. We have a national goal, but we've had probably a mix of success in terms of engagement with the private sector. I'd love to tell a story of unmitigated success with that, but part of what I've learned is when you're getting people out of their comfort zone and doing things that are new, it's just very challenging. And so, yeah, I guess I'm going on and on, but that's basically been my experience. I don't know if anyone else has.
I'm not sure. I'm going to get to maybe a different kernel of this. And if you're talking about sort of the institutional policy around playing footsie with the corporate sector. So as a new NGO, especially one that has, although we are private sector, more a 501c3, there's certainly corporate institutional reputation that we have to be careful about. And there was a lot of conversation at the board level before I came in and after I came in about just what is our level of tolerance for soliciting and accepting funding from the petrochemical industry, from the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And honestly, we went around and around and around several times. And a few of our board members are also in the ocean NGO space and have made different policies around their acceptance than the Marine Debris Foundation ultimately came to. And we have decided that we will talk to anyone, and we will talk to anyone about funding that is interested in working in alignment with us. And we understand, you know, greenwashing happens, but the reality is that the big corporate dollars are in that sector. And I personally feel, and I brought this to the table with my organization, that change happens from within. And, you know, we too talk with largely the sustainability offices, and there are good people working for industries that we may not personally align our values with, but we are walking forward together. We are also sort of in the, let's talk about, you know, you corporate A, what are your projects that you're working on? Where does that align with us? How can we move forward together? How do we commingle funds? Or how do we bring your corporate dollars through our NGO that can then release public sector dollars? So it's tricky, and every organization is going to have to set its own bar.
I'm going to switch back to Susan with the Genius Award. I'm Clay Wong. I'm a professor at University of California. I'm going to give an academic perspective in terms of the Genius Award. I think many of us are interested in this subject, but many of us are new to this. We do other research, and we also have junior faculty. And the prize is going to be very important for many of us to kind of justify doing this work at a university setting or promotions. A lot of our junior faculty are really excited about this area, but if they don't have the awards, they don't have the grants, they don't get promoted, they don't get tenure. And that's something I hope you can consider. So instead of having like one of two very large awards, it will be very helpful for us, will be several people will get it. The more amount doesn't matter as much as the Genius Prize, and it can really help our junior faculty get promoted is my view. Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. In fact, the chair of our board is Ginny Eckert, who's faculty at University of Alaska Sea Grant Director, and she has brought that into the conversation also, is that we may not want to just issue one mega prize, is that there's value in some, lower dollar amounts, but the impact and the follow through is really important. So thank you for bringing that up again.
I heard mention of a marine debris app with the University of Georgia, and I was wondering what the implementation of that app looks like in collaboration or competition maybe with other localized apps that exist, or the global CleanSwell app, or if I'm just misunderstanding the point of the app altogether.
So, I mentioned our escape trash assessment protocol, that we started out with an actual paper field sheet and paper instructions, but of course apps where it's at. People don't necessarily want to take paper sheets into the field. So when we were looking for a platform, we could have tried to create our own app for ETAP, an ETAP app, but we had an existing connection with the University of Georgia, and the way the Marine Debris Tracker works is they can have specific curated data cards so it's not just one sort of data card like it is for CleanSwell. There's a number of different data cards, and frankly, it was just easier and cheaper to put it in there. We knew Marine Debris Tracker had a lot of popularity nationally and even internationally, and so that's why we went with that particular platform. So when I was speaking at it for the Trash-Free Waters perspective, it was only for that escape trash assessment protocol, the protocol we developed as a result of stakeholder input. That is not in any way discounting Literati or CleanSwell or the other apps that are out there, many of which local entities use because that's just what fits them better. I've seen there are plenty of local organizations that do their own data cards that are not in sort of on a national platform, and so that's always been a challenge. I've heard a lot of talk in the community about trying to sort of come up with some sort of homogenizing, I don't know what the right adjective is, homogenized data card where we can unify all those. It's very challenging. If you look at the various data cards, that's very difficult to do. So eventually what happens is people just pick what's best for them. They make their own judgment. If you're not interested in ETAP on the Marine Debris Tracker, you can, like I said, you can use the paper version, or if you decide your own, you just want a rapid assessment methodology and you have something that fits for the particular trash stream in your area, then of course it's fine to use that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yeah, I can just speak a little bit to that too, because I also mentioned the Marine Debris Tracker app for the monitoring piece that we do at the NOAA Marine Debris Program. And yeah, agree with what Ramel said. I think it really depends. A lot of the different apps have different applications in terms of how the data is used, what kind of debris are you surveying. In particular for our program, the Tracker app feature for the Marine Debris Monitoring and Assessment Project is focused on macro debris on the shoreline. And so we have been running that program for a number of years, since 2012, and use paper sheets. And there's still a lot of our partners that are still using those paper sheets, and it goes into a national database. But this is really just a way to reach other people who, we all carry our phones everywhere these days. So I think it'll be a great tool to make it more accessible to a greater number of volunteers. And our process is very standardized, it has rigorously tested protocols. And so I think one of the benefits is just it goes into this national database that is publicly available and can be used for a lot of different applications. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, Carrie had a question. Hi, Susan and others involved with reducing the barriers and access to funding. I really appreciate that work and what you're doing. I'm curious though, are there other things that the foundation or others are doing to build that capacity for success, whether that's grant writing, connecting groups with investors, or that matchmaking exercise? I'm curious at what else is being done.
Ultimately, that is our goal. Right now, we're still in startup mode, and we have to scale our own organization in order to have the capacity to build capacity in the community. But absolutely, we do see that as a role eventually for us.
Yeah, I can speak to that just briefly. And Scott touched upon this about some of our bigger awards with sub-award competitions underneath them. And so I'll just mention those again. We had a grant that went to Boat US, and they are running competitions for sub-awards focused on abandoned and derelict vessels. And likewise, we have a competition or an award to the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. They're running sub-award competitions for derelict fishing gear, specifically crab and lobster trap fisheries. And so the idea with that model is that the sub-award competitions that these other entities are running is to reduce the barrier for application. So they don't have to go through the same kind of rigor of the federal application process. It's more streamlined application. And those larger organizations, so Boat US and BIMS, are providing the capacity for some of that reporting and all the metrics that federal agencies require. So our hope is that we'll see kind of a broadened group of folks applying to these competitions and just an easier kind of entry point. And so more to come on that, but it's something that we've been trying with BIL funds.
Okay, I have a question for Kit. With your unique perspective on federal policymaking, what role do you see Congress playing in advancing policies to tackle marine debris?
Thank you for your question. I definitely see Congress as playing a role for sure. The one thing that I guess that I've been thinking about recently is how to make marine debris and waste infrastructure a bipartisan issue, especially since from my perspective, it seems like it's easy for certain parties to take initiative. But yeah, I think moving forward, trying to appeal to, which maybe would require not getting entirely what folks want, but appealing to both sides. And like Susan was saying, opening up those dialogues as long as folks are in line with the same goals.
Awesome, thanks. Any other questions? Yeah. Got Ben back there.
I'll use my radio voice for this. So I was hearing the comment about Coca-Cola, and I've been thinking for a long time about how, not to be pessimistic, but our economy is based upon generating waste. Like Coca-Cola feels they're successful if they have generated, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, they brand their content so it's identifiable. And so I guess they feel like they're successful if they've generated a ton of waste. So, so I'm at MIT Sea Grant. I'm a programmer. I sit behind a computer and I develop data visualizations and interfaces for understanding the flow of debris and potentially understanding where it comes from. So my question is, where in the solutions pipeline for marine debris? And this is kind of a general question. Where in the solutions pipeline for marine debris do we see prevention? Do we see going after the root cause being generation of waste? There's been an increase in the waste generated by someone ordering their week's worth of meals delivered to their doorstep in plastic and cardboard. That's increasing. More and more people want convenience, so there's more new ways of generating waste. There's more demand for waste. So where is that in the solutions pipeline? If there are examples of where it's integrated into a project, going after the source and reducing the source of debris, I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I can say that prevention is really a key component of our program. It's kind of the foundation of how we think about the issue. We talk about, turning off the tap and really reducing marine debris at its source. So reducing the items that are potentially going to become marine debris. And in the past, we've had, funding for prevention grants that are really kind of focused on that question. How can we reduce marine debris in the first place? With our bipartisan infrastructure law funding, these are big grants, as you've heard, focused largely on removal, but the prevention of the reaccumulation of that debris is a huge component of these projects and something that we've been trying to really bake in to each funding competition to emphasize that more, because we want to be put out of the business of having to remove this stuff. So it is a big focus of what we're doing or trying to do, but it's tough. I mean, we could talk all day about it, but it comes from the design, the production side, the waste management, the disposal, the whole spectrum is pretty complex and requires, innovative, unique solutions. So I'll just leave it kind of high level there. I'm sure there's projects we could speak about that get into the specifics. I'll give it to Ramel if he has anything to say.
There's no one from the press here, right? So you've hit the crux of the issue. We all know this, right? We want to go for where the source of the problem is. I'm sure many of you have seen there has been a burgeoning of extended producer responsibility laws at the state level. The Product Stewardship Institute has been tracking a lot of these at the state and local level. We've had a national bill that probably will never pass, frankly, or at least in its current form, called the Breaking Free from Plastic Pollution Act. That does incorporate EPR. It also incorporates other circular economy sorts of initiatives. I said earlier, I talked about our reusable foodware project. I would like to always have at least one. Unfortunately, we're limited in our capacity, but I always want to have a circular economy project going to really look at the preventative aspect, and scaling reuse is part of what we're trying to do with our project. The plastic strategy that I talked about, it's actually part of a circular economy series. There's the national recycling strategy, the food waste strategy, and now the plastic strategy. There's probably one or two more coming down the pike. And it's replete with circular economy actions. But the truth is the actions in the strategy are voluntary. We're not talking about incorporating regulatory actions, and there's reasons for that. And so it's a domestic stakeholder strategy. It's not just about what EPA can do or the US government can do. It talks about how do we socialize these solutions? What are each of our roles in these sort of things? We've also had the greenwashing conversation, Susan, in our program as well. We did take money. We discussed it before we took that money, because it could be seen by certain people as greenwashing, but ultimately, that was where the money was, and we could do a lot of good with that money. So people can argue whether that was the right decision, honestly. I made the call. And so sometimes we have to see where is the private sector at, where can we get them to move on a particular issue, or what is consistent with what they're willing to do. And of course, there's more to be done, and there's a lot of actors in this space. I don't know if any of you have attended the World Wildlife Fund's annual plastic summit. At least they've done it twice. But there's a lot of conversation. I'd say the bulk of the conversation is how can we engage the private sector? What are they doing? There are initiatives out there. I don't want to be too cynical about this. There are initiatives out there that I think can really be difference making. but there's not enough right now. We all know production's still going like this. The amount in the environment's going up. When people ask me about program success, if I could even bend the growth curve, people want to talk about reduction, right? I'm just talking about slowing the rate of growth right now. And it's going to take a while before we get to reduction. That NASEM report that Mary Lee mentioned is really worth the read about how we get to that point. Pew Charitable Trust put out a Breaking the Plastic Waves report that talk about how we get to systemic change to address the issue and get to actual reduction. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of initiatives going on, but there's a lot to be done.
One thing I just wanted to add from, I guess, the congressional standpoint is and this is Kit's perspective, not Senator Murkowski's perspective, but there's been a lot of briefings on the Hill that have gotten into EPR waste, and part of that, or EPR strategies, and part of that comes with, as more states do adopt different policies, industry has been coming to us to have some sort of uniform agreement, just so it's not as cumbersome to be trading across borders, as maybe you all are aware. And so I think maybe more of the question is, how do we reframe waste? So for one, it's not hidden. Like, I think right now most of the waste that we deal with kind of gets tucked away, and how to make it appealing for other parties. So the Break Free from Plastic one is, as understandably, a pretty democratic, it's a entirely Democratic supported bill. So that's what I was getting at with how to make this appealing for everyone in Congress. And also, one thing I will say from my experience thus far is, at least in my office, the senators really respond to constituents and groups who are coming to them within their state. And so trying to unify different voices from especially Republican states or states that may not have had a plastic policy in the past, to bring that to their office. So hopefully that kind of answers a little bit of your question there. I know Susan wanted to say something too.
All right, thank you so much, panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. So we went a little bit over because that was such a riveting discussion. So we have 9 minutes until our first grantee session starts at 11:30. Stretch your legs. We have bathrooms. If you go into the room where we had coffee, and then there's signs, and then could the panelists and then John and Scott stay because we're going to take a picture. And yeah, we'll see you guys in 9 minutes. Thanks.
Do you mind taking the picture? Oh, sure. I don't know. But... Sure, if it's so.
Yeah, let's just go up there. Yeah, that sounds great.
Use this to like zoom the slide on, then the slow one will focus, and then take a ton of photos. Hold on. I can take a photo. Are you gonna be in this stuff? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, if you need to be in the photo. Okay, it should. Oh, okay. You just do it initially and then.